They would remember this day as the one when the galaxy realized humanity wasn't another species to be studied, but a question no one was ready to answer. For long after the council adjourned, the stars themselves seemed quieter, as if even the universe was wondering what kind of creature invents danger simply to feel alive. 12 delegates sat around the vast circular table aboard Harmony 7, the orbital heart of the Galactic Council. Each represented a civilization older than human history, a summit of beings shaped by their world's cruelties and triumphs. This year's agenda was deceptively simple, yet it carried the gravity of ancient curiosity. What evolutionary forces forged the deadliest predators across the known galaxy? Dr. Lyra of the Vithrak adjusted her crystalline frame, her transparent body refracting the chamber's violet light like a living prism. When she spoke, her tones created ripples that shimmered through the air, transmuted into words by the translation matrices. Our homeworld, Vithos Prime, is scourged by storms of methane and lightning that can shred flesh from existence, she began. Only those who could phase through solid matter endured. Over millennia, we mastered molecular modulation. We may pass through walls, evade matter itself, and strike where physics forbids. Her words resonated like music, the kind that sounded both elegant and threatening. Commander Thu of the Khitan Empire clicked his twin mandibles in approval, a sound like blades tapping stone. His chitin armor reflected the sterile white light of the chamber. Impressive, he said, voice sharp as static. But our evolution demanded unity, not escape. On my world, survival meant facing swarms of predators in numbers beyond counting. Alone, we were prey. Together, we became something else. He spread his upper limbs wide, one will, one mind. Millions of bodies moving as one, no hesitation, no error. We hunt with perfect synchronization. Coordination became our weapon. General Voss of the Saurus Dominion flicked his serpentine tongue, the air hissing around him. His scales rippled from deep jade to blood red. Both fine stories of adaptation, he said, tone laced with quiet superiority. But the universe breeds deadlier trials. My people thrived under acid rains that could dissolve metal. We grew armored flesh and venom potent enough to fell machines. Every Soros warrior is both shield and sword. Around the table, others took turns unveiling their evolutionary legends. The Pelagics, masters of echolocation so fine they could map stars by sound. The Rockan, silicon beings born in fluctuating gravity wells who learned to manipulate mass fields with thought. Each tale was a hymn to survival, then silence. All eyes turned toward the newest seat, the 13th. Though occupied by the youngest species, David Reed sat there, a human, ambassador of Earth. His posture was relaxed, almost unimpressive beside the towering, glittering, chitinous others. No armor, no claws, no shimmering skin. Just fabric, flesh, and a steady, unreadable gaze. Dr. Lyra inclined her radiant head. Ambassador Reed, humanity's rapid ascent is legendary. We would be honored to learn what shaped your kind. What horrors of Earth carved your survival traits? David considered the question, fingers tracing the table's smooth surface. His answer came without flourish. Poor choices, he said. A murmur of confusion swept the chamber. Translator drones blinked, recalibrating. Commander Thu's mandibles twitched. Clarify, please. You mean environmental pressures caused by poor conditions? David shook his head lightly, almost smiling. No, I mean what I said. Poor choices. Voss's scales darkened to an uneasy violet. You jest, human. No species thrives without evolutionary necessity. I'm not joking, David replied evenly. Our progress didn't come from nature's cruelty. It came from our own. Lyra's luminous body pulsed with curiosity. You mean self-inflicted adversity? Yes, he said. We made problems where none existed. We built dangers. We fought them. And when there were no dangers left, we invented new ones. Silence deepened like a vacuum. For the first time in centuries, none of the council's translators spoke. Thu's voice broke the stillness. Then humanity evolved through recklessness. David met the insectoid's many eyes. Through curiosity. Through mistakes. Through trying again after every disaster. He stood, smoothing his jacket. If you want to understand us, don't ask what threatened us. Ask what we threatened, and how we survived ourselves. He paused at the exit, eyes reflecting the chamber's shifting light. Fair warning, he said softly. You might not like what you find. As he left, the council sat in speechless disarray. For once, even the hive of Commander Thu was silent. Dr. Lyra's crystalline glow dimmed. Unacceptable, she murmured. No species denies their origins. What are they hiding? Maybe nothing, Thu said, mandibles ticking. Or maybe everything. Voss's scales rippled to black. Then we must see for ourselves. If Earth birthed a species of apex predators from boredom, the galaxy deserves to know how. And thus began the greatest research expedition ever launched. 12 civilizations uniting to study one species that refused to fit the pattern. They expected to find monsters forged by chaos. They never imagined they would find peace and realize that peace itself might be the most terrifying forge of all. The expedition launched within a single rotation of Harmony 7. 12 vessels, each carrying the best minds of their civilizations, left orbit trailing streaks of blue light across the void. Their destination, the cradle of the species that had unsettled the galaxy with 2 words: poor choices. Dr. Lyra stood in the crystalline observation dome of the Vithrak vessel Luminary's path, her refracted form shimmering with anticipation. The stars ahead stretched like liquid glass as the fleet tore through faster-than-light corridors. Around her, the others pulsed with a collective curiosity bordering on fear. For centuries, the Galactic Council had studied death worlds, planets that forged monsters out of survival. But never had they studied a paradise that birthed one. 3 weeks later, the fleet emerged at the edge of Sol system. The star burned in quiet harmony, its brilliance stable and soft. Too soft, some thought. Commander Thu's multifaceted eyes blinked as he processed the scan results. 1 star, he murmured. No volatile companions. Radiation levels below average. Even our youngest hatchlings could survive here. Dr. Kalos of the Helix Confederation, an octopoid of coiling tentacles and blinking chromatophores, worked his controls. Spectroscopic analysis confirms the 3rd planet, Earth, holds an oxygen-nitrogen atmosphere, oceans, flora, fauna, but no significant hazards. No anomalies. No reason for evolution to run amok. General Voss's scales flared crimson. Then where's the crucible? Where's the threat that honed their intelligence? There isn't one, Kalos replied, tentacles twitching in disbelief. Temperature ranges are moderate. Gravity nearly ideal. Magnetic field stable. No acid oceans, no volcanic continents. It's a garden world. The words struck the chamber like a curse. Dr. Lyra's crystalline body flickered in pale confusion. A garden world cannot produce apex predators. Survival breeds adaptation, not leisure. Something's missing. Or something's hiding, Voss hissed. The fleet descended into Earth's orbit. Clouds glided in lazy spirals. Oceans glittered beneath them like shards of blue quartz. Cities pulsed with rhythmic light, structured, peaceful, alive. No radiation scars. No planetary trauma. Just serenity. This makes no sense, Thu muttered. Every death world we've studied left visible scars. Earth looks domesticated. The Luminary's path cut through the atmosphere in a sheath of plasma. The landing site had been chosen carefully, an open field near a human settlement labeled Cambridge. Trees swayed in a mild wind, grass stretched green and soft underfoot. The air was crisp, breathable, even pleasant. Voss's scales shimmered pale yellow. If this is their origin, then they evolved in comfort. That defies every principle of adaptive biology. Moments later, a ground vehicle approached from the nearby settlement. From it emerged a human woman in a simple uniform, holding a small tablet. She waved, smiling, unarmed, unafraid. "Welcome to Earth," she said cheerfully. "Dr. Patricia Wells, Evolutionary Biology Department, University of Cambridge. Ambassador Reed said you'd be coming." Her tone carried the casual warmth of someone greeting tourists, not envoys from across the stars. Lyra's crystalline structure pulsed in disbelief. "You were expecting us?" "Of course," Dr. Wells replied. "Humans are curious. We figured the Council would want to verify Ambassador Reed's answer sooner or later." Voss hissed softly. "Then perhaps you can explain it. What environmental horrors shaped your kind into apex predators?" Dr. Wells looked around the idyllic meadow, then back at them. "Horrors?" she repeated with amusement. "This? Oh no. Earth's been good to us. Mild weather, stable climate, plenty of food. Honestly, the biggest danger here is tripping over a dog." Commander Thu's mandibles clacked sharply. "Then how did you survive long enough to develop advanced technology?" Dr. Wells shrugged. "We just tried things. Some worked, some didn't. Curiosity, I suppose." Curiosity does not forge species capable of interstellar travel, Voss growled. Necessity does. Maybe for you, she replied with a small grin. We just get bored easily. The alien delegation exchanged uneasy glances. Kylos muttered, They admit boredom as an evolutionary factor? Dr. Wells nodded as though explaining something obvious to children. When life's too easy, you start inventing problems to solve. It's fun. We climb mountains that could kill us. Dive into oceans that crush us, fly faster than we can think, just to see if we can. Lyra stared, light refracting in rhythmic disbelief. So you risk your existence out of amusement? Exactly, Dr. Wells said brightly. How else do you learn what you're capable of? The alien said nothing. The breeze stirred the grass, carrying the scent of soil and wildflowers. Somewhere nearby, laughter echoed, children playing. This world is peaceful, Lyra whispered. Too peaceful. And yet they made themselves dangerous. Not made, Dr. Wells corrected gently. We became. There's a difference. As the research team returned to their ships, the weight of realization pressed against them. Earth had no scars, no predators, no nightmares. Yet from this serenity rose a species that built fire to fight darkness, and then built suns to chase it farther. Commander Thu's final remark lingered in the comms channel. If paradise made them restless, what will the galaxy make them become? They came expecting to study survival. Instead, they found creation, and the terrifying truth that curiosity, not fear, might be evolution's sharpest weapon. For 7 rotations, the research fleet remained in orbit over Earth. The planet's serenity mocked every law of evolutionary logic. No death storms, no killer fauna, no biological arms race. And yet below them thrived a species that had mastered the stars in record time. Dr. Lyra stared at the planet, through the crystalline walls of the luminaries. Hotham, there has to be something hidden beneath that beauty, she said softly. No species becomes this capable without consequence. Commander Thu's mandibles twitched in restless thought. Then we will find the scars invisible to the surface, and so they descended again, this time not to the fields of Earth, but into its archives. The Global History Institute sat atop an ancient foundation of human civilization, a colossal library filled with holographic archives spanning tens of thousands of years. Dr. Patricia Wells escorted them through corridors lined with glowing timelines. Each contained wars, inventions, and revolutions, the story of a species perpetually in motion. Dr. Lyra's voice resonated like a trembling chord. You recorded everything? Of course, Dr. Wells said, gesturing to a wall-sized timeline. We like remembering our mistakes. They make great teachers. Thu's compound eyes reflected the glowing screens. Mistakes? Wars, she answered casually as if naming the weather. Lots of them. General Voss flicked his tail, his scales deepening to an ominous violet. Define lots, Dr. Wells tapped the display. Roughly 14,000 recorded wars in the past 5,000 years. That's not counting smaller skirmishes or cold conflicts. The alien chamber fell into absolute silence. Thu finally broke it. 14,000? His mandibles trembled. That's statistically self-extermination. Wells shrugged. Almost was a few times. Lyra's body dimmed to a pale, anxious blue. And yet you survived? Barely, Wells admitted. We tend to stop just short of destroying ourselves. Usually when we realize we'd have nothing left to argue about if we did. Kalos's tentacles coiled nervously. But why fight at all? Your planet was safe, your resources plentiful. What was the catalyst? Wells tilted her head thoughtfully. Ambition, fear, greed, pride, take your pick. Sometimes we fight over territory, sometimes over beliefs, sometimes because we can. Voss's forked tongue flickered. That's madness, maybe, Wells said. But madness built rockets. She led them to another hall. Here, images of machines, laboratories, and explosions cycled endlessly. Each invention, each discovery bore a timestamp aligned with a conflict. Thu leaned forward, scanning the data. You developed metallurgy, explosives, powered flight, nuclear energy, computers. All during wars. Yep. Wells smiled faintly. Nothing motivates progress like trying not to lose. Lyra's crystalline fingers trembled against the console. You mean your technological evolution was fueled by conflict? Exactly. We're very creative under pressure. Voss's scales shifted from red to black, a sign of dread among his species. You created planet-killing weapons not to defend against alien invaders, but to use against yourselves? Wells hesitated. That was the plan, yes, but we never quite went that far. Something always stopped us. Maybe luck, maybe fear, maybe hope, Kalos murmured. That's not evolution. That's suicide postponed. Lyra turned, her voice rising in disbelief. You built extinction into your progress. Wells's smile faded. We built awareness into it too. We learned that destruction and creation are neighbors. You can't invent fire without learning how not to burn the world down. The aliens exchanged glances of growing unease. Everything they knew about intelligent life had just inverted. Survival wasn't humanity's engine, conflict was. Self-made adversity, chosen chaos had driven them to godlike heights. Thu's eyes shifted toward another display showing humanity's exploration history. You scaled mountains that could kill you. You dove into the depths of your oceans. You ventured into the void of space without necessity. Of course, Wells said. Exploration is how we stay sane. When there are no wars, we find new frontiers. It's our therapy, Lyra whispered. You risk annihilation for peace of mind, wouldn't you? Wells asked softly. Silence. The question hung in the air like a gravitational anomaly. That night, the research team reviewed their findings. The numbers, the patterns, the impossible paradox. A species that became dangerous not because it had to, but because it wanted to. Lyra stood before the holographic projection of Earth, its surface glowing blue and gold. Every civilization we know evolved through necessity, she said quietly. They fought their worlds. Humans fought themselves. Thu's voice was low, almost reverent, and in doing so they became a species that no longer fears failure. Voss's scales pulsed darkly. Or they simply stopped recognizing it, Kalos added. They learned that destruction and invention are the same art, just performed with different intentions. Lyra's crystalline edges dimmed as she reached the only conclusion that fit. Then perhaps humanity's strength is not in surviving chaos, but in creating it. She turned back to the window, Earth's night side blooming with lights of its cities, tiny sparks defying darkness. They are a paradox incarnate, she whispered. A species that forges weapons to create peace, that burns itself to see how bright it can shine. They came to study evolution and found revolution, and for the first time the galaxy realized humanity's greatest predator was not the world around them, but their own imagination. The next phase of the research began in silence. After days of studying humanity's violent history, even the most analytical minds aboard the Luminary's path found themselves unsettled. Their data didn't match any evolutionary model ever recorded. How could a species that should have destroyed itself instead rise to the stars? Dr. Lyra stood in the archive chamber, crystalline light flickering across the walls as she reviewed endless human timelines. Each technological leap, metal, gunpowder, flight, computation, was born in the shadow of conflict. Yet each leap had also become a tool for creation. They built destruction, she murmured, and then learned to wield it as art. Across the room, Commander Thu's multifaceted eyes reflected a holographic projection of humanity's technological evolution. Look here, he said, tapping the timeline with one sharp limb. Their earliest chemistry emerged from alchemy, primitive superstition, but it led to medicine, industry, and fuel refinement. General Voss's tail lashed slowly, his scales flickering with unease. Every act of creation seems balanced on a blade. Even their pursuit of energy birthed annihilation. Dr. Wells, ever calm, gestured to another display, this one depicting sleek rockets and vast orbital stations. That's true, she admitted. But you're missing the pattern. When we master destruction, we always turn it into something else. Thu's mandibles clicked softly. Explain. Well, she said, the first fire that burned our forest also cooked our food. The first explosives that tore through battlefields powered our engines. The atom bomb that nearly ended us taught us how to harness stars. Lyra turned to face her, crystalline tones shimmering with disbelief. You learned to build suns after nearly extinguishing your own world? Wells smiled faintly. That's one way to describe nuclear fusion, yes. Kalos, the helix analyst, shifted his color bands to anxious gray. That's not advancement, he muttered. That's evolution through catastrophe. Exactly, Wells replied. Catastrophe is a great teacher. The research team exchanged glances. To every other intelligent species, survival meant adaptation to the world. To humans, survival meant adapting the world itself. Lyra paced slowly before the glowing projection of human history. You treat progress like a weapon, she said. Wells nodded. Because curiosity is dangerous, Voss hissed softly, his forked tongue flicking. Curiosity cannot destroy planets. Curiosity built the weapons that could, Wells countered. And curiosity stopped us from using them. Sue frowned. That is paradoxical. Exactly, Wells said, smiling again. That's why we're still here. Lyra stopped walking, crystalline reflections scattering across the room. You weaponized curiosity, she whispered. Turned exploration into competition, knowledge into conquest. Not conquest, Wells corrected gently. Challenge. The unknown is the only opponent that never dies. The aliens fell silent. For beings who had evolved under endless environmental pressure, the idea of voluntary danger was incomprehensible. Yet the data was irrefutable. Humans created crises to evolve. They didn't survive in spite of chaos. They thrived because of it. The next day, Lyra and her team observed a live demonstration at one of Earth's aerospace facilities. Human engineers in protective suits worked around a colossal rocket. The air shimmered with heat and tension. Observe, Wells said. We developed these engines first to deliver destruction. Nuclear payloads, ballistic missiles. But now they carry explorers, satellites, and dreamers. Lyra's crystalline body vibrated with harmonic resonance. They turned war machines into vessels of discovery. Exactly. Every weapon becomes a lesson eventually. Thu stared as fire erupted from the rocket's base, the ship roaring skyward on a column of flame. It's madness, he said. Controlled insanity. And that, Wells said proudly, is humanity's greatest skill. As the rocket pierced the sky, the sound rolled over the research team like thunder. Voss's scales reflected the inferno. Do they ever stop pushing upward? He asked. No, Wells said simply. When we can't go higher, we dig deeper. When we can't dig, we build. Kalos flicked through his data feed. I see the pattern again. Every time they destroy, they create twice as much. Because failure teaches faster than safety, Wells said. It hurts more. So we remember it longer. Lyra stared at the contrail fading into the stratosphere. Perhaps pain is their catalyst. Wells smiled faintly. Pain makes us curious about better ways to live. Curiosity makes us dangerous. That night, the research team gathered in quiet reflection. The window of their observation dome framed Earth like a glowing gem. Cities blinked across the darkness, evidence of a civilization that refused to sleep. Lyra broke the silence. Every other apex species reached equilibrium once survival was secured. But humans, they never stop. Even when they have enough, they want more. Thu clicked thoughtfully. Not greed, momentum, curiosity, Lyra corrected. Weaponized into destiny. Voss's scales dimmed to a somber hue. What happens when they run out of new frontiers? Kalos turned from his console. Then they'll make new ones. The crystalline leader looked down at the tranquil world below. They turned war into discovery, fear into fuel, destruction into design. If this is their pattern, then the galaxy itself may be their next experiment. They thought they were studying a species that survived its wars. But humanity hadn't survived war. It had evolved through it. And war was only the beginning. Morning sunlight spilled over the cities of Earth like liquid gold. To the visiting researchers, the planet seemed a living contradiction. Peaceful, green and full of laughter, yet home to a species that had turned chaos into progress. Dr. Lyra and her team walked through a human urban district accompanied by Dr. Patricia Wells. The crystalline alien moved with deliberate grace, her refracting form throwing splinters of light across the pavement. You claim your kind thrives without external threat, she said. Then tell me, how do you maintain your survival instincts? How do your young learn danger in such a calm world? Wells smiled, adjusting her handheld device. We teach them through play. Lyra's light pulsed in curiosity. Play? Watch. They arrived at a public park. Dozens of human children raced across the grass, laughing, shouting, and wielding glowing plastic weapons that projected harmless beams of light. Others constructed makeshift forts, coordinating ambushes and strategies. Commander Thu tilted his head, his antennae twitching. They're simulating combat. Capture the flag, Wells explained cheerfully. A classic. Teaches teamwork, deception, and adaptability. They learn how to lose gracefully and win intelligently. General Voss's scales rippled to a worried orange. They train for war as entertainment? Wells chuckled. You could say that. But they're not learning how to kill. They're learning how to think under pressure. Lyra watched closely. The children's movements were fluid, strategic. When one team gained an advantage, the other changed tactics instantly. When cornered, they improvised new plans with childlike creativity. Every setback was greeted not with despair but laughter. They treat failure as a puzzle, Lyra murmured. They enjoy defeat. Exactly, said Wells. We found that when failure is fun, learning never stops. Thu's mandibles clicked in disbelief. You've turned survival training into a game. Games are how we build problem solvers, Wells replied. The battlefield isn't the goal. The thinking is. Later that afternoon, they visited a facility called a gym. Inside, hundreds of humans pushed themselves against machines, climbed ropes, and sparred in controlled combat. Sweat and determination filled the air. Kalos's tentacles curled protectively. They inflict exhaustion willingly. It's called exercise, Wells said. Keeps the body strong, mind sharper. Voss narrowed his eyes. But why make it competitive? Why not simply maintain health? Wells gestured toward two humans grappling in a martial arts ring. Because competition adds stakes. We improve faster when there's something to overcome, someone to match or surpass. Lyra's crystalline tones deepened, her structure vibrating with quiet unease. They chase resistance as if it were nourishment. Exactly, Wells replied. Without resistance, we stagnate. The aliens exchanged glances. Across countless worlds, peace was synonymous with stagnation. Yet here, on this tranquil planet, peace had become fuel. That evening, Wells brought them to a vast building illuminated with neon light and human laughter. An entertainment complex, she explained. Here's where it gets interesting. Inside, they found humans riding massive mechanical constructs that hurled them through loops, drops, and spins at terrifying speeds. Some screamed in apparent terror, then immediately cued to do it again. In another section, groups of people played immersive simulations of warfare and survival. Kalos's tentacles quivered in disbelief. They replicate danger, voluntarily. Horror films, roller coasters, video games, escape rooms, Wells said. We love fear, as long as we control it. Lyra stared at a screen showing humans running from digital monsters, hearts racing, faces gleaming with adrenaline. You seek danger. For pleasure. Wells laughed softly. We call it adventure. Voss's scales rippled between crimson and black. Your species turned survival into art. Not survival, Wells said with pride. Improvement. After days of observation, the alien team convened in the Luminary's Path's briefing chamber. The holographic projections displayed their cumulative findings, patterns of risk-seeking behavior embedded in every layer of human society. Lyra's crystalline glow dimmed. They teach conflict before they teach peace. They train adaptation before stability. They condition curiosity before caution. Thu added, their entire civilization is a continuous stress test. Voss's scales shimmered darkly. They practice warfare for recreation. They practice danger for joy. Their young grow up addicted to risk. Kalos's voice was soft, trembling. They are evolution made self-aware. Lyra turned toward the observation window, Earth's lights twinkling below like a pulse. They've replaced natural selection with chosen challenge, she whispered. They no longer wait for the universe to test them. They test themselves. Thu clicked thoughtfully. Perhaps that is why they learn faster than any known race. They simulate extinction daily and survive it for fun. Lyra stood silently for a long moment. The idea that danger could be entertainment was something no other civilization had ever conceived. On most worlds, safety marked the end of growth. On Earth, it was merely a starting point. Finally, she said, they have built a species incapable of comfort. Voss's tail lashed once. Then comfort may be what kills them. Lyra's crystalline form brightened to a hard, radiant gold. Or what saves the rest of us from becoming like them. They had seen children play at war and adults flirt with death for sport. And for the first time, the alien scholars wondered, what happens when a species that thrives on challenge runs out of challenges to conquer? The human military base sprawled across the horizon like a steel labyrinth, half buried in the dust of an abandoned plateau. To the alien researchers, it looked primitive. No shimmering force fields, no gravity wells, no telepathic networks. Just concrete, wind, and humans. Dr. Lyra stood beside Ambassador David Reed on an elevated platform overlooking the training grounds. "Ambassador," she said carefully, "we've studied your wars, your weapons, even your children's games. But this demonstration, is it necessary?" Reed smiled faintly. "If you want to understand humanity, you have to see us in motion. You've seen how we play. Now see what happens when play becomes purpose." Commander Thu's mandibles clicked softly. "You call this training?" Reed gestured toward the field below. "No, we call it improvisation." 12 soldiers stood at the edge of a simulated alien terrain. The ground was uneven, filled with false hazards and moving obstacles. Overhead, drones cast shifting shadows. The soldiers wore basic gear, nothing more advanced than what could be replicated on most council worlds. Colonel Rivera's voice rang over the comms. "Mission parameters, hostile environment. Unknown objectives. 6-hour window. Survive and adapt." Lyra blinked, her crystalline surface catching the midday sun. "That's not a mission briefing," she said. "There's no tactical data, no objectives." Reed's tone was calm. "That's the point." The soldiers moved. Not in formation, not following any script. They scattered, testing terrain, throwing stones at suspected traps, disassembling tools to craft improvised sensors. When one stumbled upon a puzzle-like barrier, the galaxy's greatest minds, the most advanced civilizations, had evolved out of necessity, to survive the harsh, unforgiving forces of nature. But humanity had evolved out of curiosity. They were a species built on movement, on the drive to never be satisfied with what they had. It was both their greatest gift and their greatest danger. Commander Thu's mandibles clicked softly as he surveyed the endless stretch of blue and green below. "They fear stagnation more than death." Kalos rotated, his tentacles moving nervously. "They do not grow in response to need. They grow in response to boredom, to curiosity. They create challenge where there was none." Voss's tail twitched. "If this curiosity ever runs out, what then?" "Then they'll find something else," Lyra replied. "Something more." The next day they visited a massive research complex located outside one of Earth's major cities. Wells had arranged the tour for the aliens, human innovation at its finest. The building sprawled, a tangled mess of metallic beams, glass corridors, and rooms that seemed to exist solely to test the limits of known science. Inside, the team was led through laboratory after laboratory, each one filled with new experiments: quantum computing, artificial intelligence, interdimensional theory. Each project aimed higher than the last, pushing boundaries that even the brightest minds could barely grasp. "This is their true nature," Wells said. "Always trying, always questioning. If it doesn't exist, they invent it. If it fails, they rebuild it." Thu's compound eyes flickered over the projections. "They don't just seek knowledge, they seek power." "They seek answers," Wells corrected. "And if they can't find an answer, they'll make one." Lyra's crystalline form dimmed slightly. "They've weaponized knowledge itself. But if they ever cease this drive, then they would stop being human," Wells interrupted. "They would become like the others." The others. The stable, secure civilizations that had long ago reached their zenith. The ones who had adapted to their environment and found peace. But humanity, they couldn't stand peace. It was a prison. Later that night, the research team gathered once more in the observation room, staring at Earth's glowing surface below. The stars seemed dimmer now, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. "Do you see it?" Lyra asked, her voice reverberating softly through the chamber. "The stillness beneath the surface. The absence of growth. That is their greatest fear." Thu's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "They've created an engine of evolution, but without a clear end. And without an end, there is no direction." Voss's scales rippled with unease. "If they ever stop innovating, if they ever lose the drive for progress, they will spiral into chaos. A species built on motion whose very identity is in the next thing." Kalos's voice trembled slightly. "What happens when they can't find a new frontier? What happens if they run out of curiosity?" "They'll create new ones," Lyra said, her tone firm. "That's what they've always done. They don't wait for the universe to change, they make it change. But if they reach a point where there's nothing left to create, They will consume themselves. The silence in the chamber deepened, and for the first time, the alien researchers felt a true sense of dread, not for what humanity was, but for what it might become. The next day, the delegation convened with Ambassador Reed again. The human stood in front of them, calm and composed as if he had anticipated their concerns. "What do you fear about us, Ambassador?" Voss asked, his voice tight with the unease that had been growing since their arrival. Reed met his gaze steadily. "I fear that we'll stop." Thu's mandibles clicked rapidly. "Stop? Stop moving forward. Stop questioning. Stop seeking. If we ever let that happen, we'll stagnate, and that's when we'll lose our humanity." Lyra's crystalline form shimmered with a ghost of understanding. "You fear stillness more than death." "More than anything," Reed confirmed. "We've seen it before. Empires crumble when they stop growing. Civilizations fall into decay. It's the only thing that kills us. You're willing to destroy the known universe to avoid that decay," Lyra said quietly. "Yes," Reed answered. "Because if we stop, we cease to be human, and that's a death I'm not ready to face." As the delegation left Reed, the implications of his words settled heavily on their shoulders. They had come to study humanity, but they had discovered something far more dangerous: the absence of fear. Humanity had no fear of the unknown, only of the known. They feared the comfort of complacency, the stillness of existence. They had created an engine of progress that could not be turned off, and now they were pushing it beyond the stars. For the first time, the alien researchers understood. Humanity wasn't just another species. They were the galaxy's experiment, a species that refused to stop evolving, even when evolution itself was no longer required. The galaxy's greatest minds had been studying humanity's drive for progress, but now they understood the real question. What happens when a species cannot stop moving forward, when they fear the stillness of eternity? The research team sat in their conference room aboard Luminary's path, the quiet hum of the ship's engines the only sound. Earth was far below, its blue surface now just a dot in the vastness of space. But for the alien delegates, that small planet had become the focal point of their greatest uncertainty. Dr. Lyra gazed out the observation window, her crystalline form reflecting the stars. "We've studied them, their history, their wars, their survival tactics. But I can't shake the feeling that we've missed something." Commander Thu's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "What more is there to understand? They are an anomaly, driven by an insatiable hunger for progress. We've seen that." "Yes," Lyra said, her voice soft with thought. "But we've also seen something else, something even more dangerous. They are not just seeking progress. They are seeking purpose." Voss's scales shifted from deep purple to a questioning orange. "Purpose? What does that mean in the context of humanity's drive?" "Purpose," Lyra repeated, "is what drives them to explore, to innovate, to challenge the universe. They are not driven by fear of extinction or necessity. They are driven by an internal need to become. To evolve not for survival but for meaning." Thu flicked his antennae nervously. "Meaning? That is an alien concept to most species. We evolve because we must. We adapt to survive." "And yet," Lyra said, "humans don't need to evolve. They've already conquered every known threat to their existence. What they lack is not survival, it is meaning. And that is why they push forward endlessly, because they can't bear the thought of standing still." Kalos turned his multi-eyed gaze toward the stars. "They seek to evolve beyond the very limits of their existence, beyond their biology, beyond their environment. If we truly understand them, we must accept that humanity's greatest enemy is not death or extinction, but stagnation." Voss's scales flickered to a worried black. "Then they will continue to innovate forever, even when there is no longer a need to." "Yes," Lyra said quietly, "because for them, the need is always self-created. They invent challenges simply to give their lives meaning." The conversation shifted as Reed joined the team once again. The human ambassador had been silent for days, but now his presence felt like an inevitable part of the equation. "You're thinking about us again, aren't you?" Reed asked, his tone light but knowing. Lyra nodded slowly. "You've confused us. You've shown us a species that doesn't need to fight for survival, and yet you've created a system of continuous evolution, driven not by necessity but by an internal hunger." "We don't stop," Reed said, his voice firm. "And that's the point. You've seen it in our history, in our games, in our military training. You've even seen it in our children. We never stop pushing. If we do, we stagnate. And if we stagnate, we die. You create threats to avoid the stillness of peace, Kalos said quietly. We create purpose. Reed corrected. It's not about avoiding peace. It's about living with purpose. If we lose that, we lose everything. The delegation sat in stunned silence. Reed's words echoed in their minds, reverberating in ways they hadn't expected. Humanity wasn't just seeking knowledge, nor was it simply experimenting. They were on a quest for something deeper, a drive that transcended biology, a drive to transform existence itself. General Voss's scales shimmered in dark shades of concern. If they cannot stop, if they cannot rest, what will they do when they reach the limits of the galaxy? What will they do when they realize the universe itself has no more questions to answer? Lyra's crystalline form pulsed with a slow, reflective glow. They'll make new questions. If the galaxy has no more answers for them, they will reach beyond it, to other realms, other dimensions, the void itself. Humanity cannot be bound by the universe as we know it. Thu's eyes widened. Do you mean they will expand the bounds of existence? Reed met his gaze steadily. I don't know what they'll do. I can't predict it, but I can tell you this. They will never stop. We will never stop. The research team's unease grew as the days wore on. The delegation had come to study humanity, to understand the forces that drove them. But the more they learned, the more they realized that humanity was not just a species among others. They were an experiment in progress, an unstoppable force that might change the very fabric of reality itself. Lyra stood before the holographic projection of Earth, staring at the planet with a sense of finality. They are the greatest experiment in the galaxy, a species that thrives not on fear, but on the pursuit of meaning itself. And they will shape the future of the universe. Commander Thu's mandibles clicked, his tone filled with awe and dread. They are a force of nature, one that will never stop pushing forward. Voss's scales shimmered with uncertainty. But what happens when they reach the edge of the universe? Will they tear apart everything just to see what lies beyond? Kalos's voice was quiet. If they do, will we stop them, can we? The question lingered in the air unanswered. Humanity had revealed its nature to the Council, and with it the galaxy's greatest challenge had only just begun. They had witnessed a species that refused to be bound by time, space, or necessity. But what would happen when humanity reached the limits of existence itself? And would the galaxy be ready for what came next? The luminary's path drifted silently on the outskirts of the Sol system, the stars beyond offering no answers to the question that hung heavy in the minds of its passengers. For the first time, the alien delegation was truly at a loss. Humanity had shown them a truth they had never anticipated, a species that did not evolve from necessity, but from an intrinsic, unyielding drive to push beyond the known, beyond existence itself. For every question they had asked, every observation they had made, they found only one answer. Humanity would never stop. Dr. Lyra paced the observation deck, her crystalline form flickering with a myriad of colors. They are not just another species, she said quietly. They are an experiment, an evolution of thought, not biology, a force that does not rest, does not stagnate, and does not accept any limits because they believe no limits exist. Commander Thu's mandibles clicked nervously. But how can they keep going? They've reached the edges of the galaxy. They've created the tools of gods. What is left for them to conquer? Lyra stopped and faced him. They will conquer everything. They will not stop until they reach the limits of existence itself, and when they reach that point, if they ever do, they will create a new frontier. Kalos, his tentacles twitching, added, This is no longer a species driven by biology. They are beyond survival. They are driven by something other, something that propels them toward the unknown, even when there is nothing left to discover. General Voss's scales shimmered with a deep unease. What happens when they exhaust the universe? What happens when humanity runs out of questions to ask? Lyra's voice was calm but filled with quiet dread. They won't stop. They'll create new questions, new realities. They'll push beyond this galaxy, beyond the multiverse if necessary, because they cannot bear the thought of stillness. It is their fear, their greatest drive. They will continue to evolve, continue to innovate, until there is nothing left for them to create, except themselves. On Earth, the hum of the human civilization continued unabated. Cities sprawled across continents, space stations circled the planet, and ships launched into the unknown, carrying humanity's curiosity ever further. There was no crisis on Earth, no war, no existential threat to fight against. Just a single unrelenting force that powered the future, the desire to create, to understand, to move forward. Ambassador Reed, now more reflective than ever, stood on the balcony of the human embassy, watching as the stars shimmered above. The researchers had learned much from humanity, but the true nature of what they had seen was still sinking in. He turned as Lyra approached. "You're leaving soon?" he said, his voice tinged with quiet understanding. "I suppose you've seen enough to form your conclusions." Lyra nodded slowly. "I can't say I fully understand you, Ambassador Reed, but I do understand this. You are a species that cannot be stopped, not because of necessity, but because of will. And in that you are unlike anything we've ever encountered." Reed's eyes flickered with something resembling a smile. "I've been telling you that. The question is, what will you do with this knowledge?" The council meeting was held 2 days later, with delegates from all 12 species gathered in the Grand Chamber. The mood was different. The usual tension of interspecies diplomacy had given way to something else. Uncertainty. Fear. Dr. Lyra stood before the council, her crystalline body glowing as she recounted the expedition's findings. "We have observed a species unlike any we've ever known. Humanity does not evolve to survive. It evolves to create. It does not seek peace or stability, for those are chains. They do not rest, for rest is stagnation." Commander Thu's voice echoed across the chamber. "They've unlocked the greatest secret of evolution. That growth, true growth, is not bound by biology. It is bound only by the imagination. And they will never stop growing," Lyra continued. "They will seek new frontiers not in space or time, but in the very fabric of existence. They will break the boundaries of the universe itself or create new ones when they reach the limits." General Voss's scales rippled with a deeper, darker color. "And what happens when they reach the edge? What happens when they can create no more?" "They will create themselves," Lyra said, her voice reverberating with quiet understanding. "Humanity will become the universe's final question, its ultimate experiment. They will push until there is nothing left to push. And when there is nothing, they will become—" The chamber was silent. The weight of what Lyra had said hung in the air like a heavy, impenetrable cloud. The implications were staggering. Outside, Earth continued its quiet orbit around the sun, as if unaware of the cosmic discussion happening among the stars. For humanity, the journey had only just begun. They were not bound by the limits of nature, but by the unyielding force of curiosity that would never stop, never settle, never accept the inevitable quiet of the universe. As the council members turned their attention inward, Lyra's voice echoed again, but this time it was not to the council. It was a final thought, a question that had no answer. Would we too stop if we could? Humanity had become more than just a species. They were a force of nature, an unstoppable engine of progress, and for the first time in galactic history, the galaxy had a new question to face. What happens when a species transcends the universe itself?